Across the long expanse of ancient world history, the name of the Persian Empire, particularly under the Achaemenid Empire, stands as one of the largest and most influential empires ever to exist. Established in the mid-6th century BCE by Cyrus the Great, this empire did not merely grow, it expanded rapidly into a transcontinental power that fundamentally transformed the political, economic, and cultural landscape of Eurasia. At the height of its glory, especially during the reign of Darius I in the 5th century BCE, the Persian territory is estimated to have covered approximately 5 to 7 million square kilometers. This scale made it one of the largest empires in pre-modern history, an immense entity whose authority stretched from Anatolia in Asia Minor to the Indus Valley, and from Central Asia to Egypt and parts of North Africa. However, behind this vast expanse lay a more complex reality. Not all regions were under equally strong control. In areas such as Thrace and parts of the Balkans, Persian authority was more limited in military and administrative terms, rather than fully integrated as in core regions like Iran, Mesopotamia, or Anatolia. Nevertheless, its geographical scope still reflected an unprecedented imperial scale for its time. Persia's superiority did not lie solely in its territorial size, but also in its ability to manage diversity. With hundreds of ethnic groups, languages, and traditions, the empire developed a relatively flexible and adaptive administrative system. Through the division of territory into provinces known as satrapies, the central government was able to maintain control while granting limited autonomy to local rulers, an approach that Whitletry. In the economic sphere, Persia played a crucial role in standardizing the use of currency on an imperial scale. They introduced the gold daric and the silver siglos coins, which significantly facilitated interregional trade. Although coinage systems first developed in Lydia, Persia was the power that successfully disseminated and stabilized their use across an extensive economic network. Moreover, Persia was also renowned for its ability to build remarkable communication infrastructure for its time. One of its greatest achievements was the network of royal roads, including the Royal Road, which stretched more than 2,500 kilometers from Anatolia to the heart of Persia. This road became the lifeline of the empire, enabling troop mobility, the distribution of goods, and fast and efficient administrative communication. This communication system was further strengthened by the imperial postal service known as the Angarium, which Herodotus described as an exceptionally fast and reliable message delivery system. Although it was not the first postal system in human history, the Persian system was among the most organized and effective on a large imperial scale. In the cultural and intellectual sphere, the Persian Empire also served as a bridge between civilizations. Its strategic location opened pathways for the exchange of ideas, technologies, and beliefs between Egypt, Mesopotamia, India, and Greece. Religious traditions such as Zoroastrianism also contributed to shaping the foundations of moral thought and cosmology in the region. For more than 2 centuries, the Persian Empire did not merely endure, it dominated the geopolitical landscape of the ancient world with remarkable strength and stability. However, like all great empires in history, this grandeur was ultimately not eternal. And from here, fundamental questions begin to emerge. How could an empire of such magnitude and complexity be formed within a relatively short period of time? And equally important, what factors ultimately led to its decline and fall at the hands of a new power? Long before the rise of a great empire that would shake the ancient world, the region now known as Iran was home to various Indo-Iranian tribes living semi-nomadic lives. They survived across vast and harsh highlands, relying on pastoralism and forming small, scattered communities. Within this landscape, the early foundations of the Persian people began to take shape, particularly in the region of Fars, Persis, which would later become the center of their power. However, history began to move in a different direction in the mid-6th century BCE. From this modest environment emerged a figure whose name would echo through the ages, Cyrus the Great. He was the son of Cambyses I, a local Persian ruler under the domination of the Medes. The early life of Cyrus is shrouded in a story that borders on legend. Through the writings of Herodotus, he is depicted as a figure destined from birth to overthrow his own grandfather, Astyages. It is said that Astyages dreamed his grandson would one day seize his throne. Driven by this fear, he ordered the infant Cyrus to be killed. Yet fate intervened, the order was never carried out, and Cyrus was allegedly raised in secrecy by a humble family. Although this story remains deeply embedded in tradition and carries a compelling dramatic tone, modern historians approach it with caution. They consider the narrative likely to be a political legend that developed within Greek tradition. Contemporary Babylonian sources do not confirm these details. Thus, while significant in historiography, its accuracy remains a matter of debate. What can be historically confirmed is the moment that truly altered the course of history. Around 550 BCE, Cyrus led a rebellion against Median rule under Astyages. According to Babylonian records, particularly the Nabonidus Chronicle, the fall of Astyages was not solely due to Persian military strength, but also the result of internal divisions. One key figure was Harpagus, a Median general who defected and supported Cyrus. This victory was not merely a change of power, it was a civilizational turning point. Cyrus not only overthrew the Medes, but also carefully adopted their governing structure. He positioned himself as the legitimate successor, paving the way for the rise of the Achaemenid Persian Empire. Yet Cyrus's ambition did not stop there. After consolidating control over Media, he moved westward, targeting the kingdom of Lydia in Anatolia, a wealthy kingdom ruled by Croesus, a figure synonymous with prosperity. Their conflict culminated around 546 BCE. After an inconclusive initial battle, Croesus retreated to his capital, Sardis. It was here that Cyrus's strategic brilliance became evident. Contrary to the common wartime practice of waiting for the next campaigning season, he chose swift action. A follow-up assault was launched without delay, and within a relatively short time, Sardis was besieged and captured. Herodotus even records the use of camels in battle to disrupt the Lydian cavalry. However, this detail cannot be verified by other sources and is therefore regarded by modern historians as a possible anecdote or dramatization. With the fall of Sardis, Lydia formally became part of Persian rule. Greek tradition suggests that Croesus was spared and even made an advisor, although this claim remains historically uncertain. What is more substantiated, however, is Cyrus's relatively tolerant approach toward the conquered, a pattern also reflected in Babylonian sources. The next phase of expansion brought Cyrus to one of the greatest centers of ancient civilization, Babylon. The city, then ruled by Nabonidus, was experiencing internal tensions. His rule was not fully supported by the religious elite, particularly the priests at the god Marduk. In 539 BCE, Persian forces entered Babylon, and what followed was markedly different from typical conquests. The event unfolded relatively peacefully. The Nabonidus Chronicle records that the city fell without major resistance, possibly due to internal support for Cyrus or the weakened legitimacy of the previous ruler. Some Greek sources, such as Herodotus and Xenophon, offer a more dramatic account, namely the diversion of the Euphrates River to enter the city through the riverbed. However, this version is not supported by contemporary Babylonian sources and is therefore viewed as a later narrative tradition. What followed became one of Cyrus's greatest legacies. Rather than destroying the city, he adopted a strikingly different approach. He presented himself not as a conqueror, but as a liberator. This is reflected in the famous document, the Cyrus Cylinder, which illustrates policies of temple restoration and respect for local beliefs. With the fall of Babylon, Cyrus now controlled Mesopotamia, Syria, and the Levant, governing one of the most strategic regions in the history of human civilization. On the other hand, his eastern expansions also reached Central Asia and parts of the region surrounding the Indus Valley, although the exact boundaries remain debated among historians. Nevertheless, it is important to note that Egypt was not yet part of his domain. The conquest of Egypt would only occur under the reign of his son Cambyses II. In the end, Cyrus was not merely a conqueror. He was the architect of a new order, an empire capable of uniting the great centers of ancient civilization within a single system of rule. He laid the foundation for a model of governance that was not only vast in geography, but also complex in diversity, a legacy that would endure long after his passing. After the death of Cyrus the Great, the mantle of power passed to his son, Cambyses II. Under his leadership, the empire's expansion continued, reaching Egypt in 525 BCE, an extraordinary achievement that extended Persian influence into one of the most prominent centers of ancient civilization. However, behind this success, political stability began to weaken. Following Cambyses' death, the Persian Empire did not enter a period of glory, but instead descended into a serious phase of crisis. In 522 BCE, a ruler emerged known in Persian sources as Badia, or in other accounts referred to as Gormata, a figure officially labeled by the royal narrative as an impostor. This episode quickly became one of the most complex controversies in Persian historiography. In the monumental inscription known as the Behistun inscription, a Persian noble named Darius I claimed that he had overthrown Gormata and restored legitimate rule. However, behind this claim, modern historians perceive alternative possibilities. The narrative presented by Darius is regarded by some as a form of political legitimization of his rule. There is even a perspective suggesting that Badia may have been the rightful ruler who was later overthrown. Regardless of this debate, one fact remains undeniable. Darius's ascent to the throne was not a peaceful process, but the result of conflict and a complex, tension-filled consolidation of power. After securing his position, the next major challenge quickly emerged. Various regions of the empire rose in rebellion. In the early years of his reign, Darius was forced to confront and suppress uprisings in Babylon, Media, Egypt, and several other territories. His success in quelling these revolts not only saved the empire from disintegration, but also laid the foundation for the major transformations that would soon follow. Under Darius's leadership, the Persian Empire did not merely expand geographically, it was also transformed into a system organized with an unprecedented level of administrative complexity. He refined the division of territory into provinces known as satrapies. Each satrapy was governed by a satrap or provincial governor, yet their authority was not absolute. A system of strict oversight was implemented through the presence of military commanders and royal inspectors, creating a balance of power designed to prevent local rebellions. One of the most significant innovations introduced by Darius was the standardization of the taxation system. Each satrapy was required to pay a fixed tribute, adjusted according to its economic capacity. This reform produced a more stable, predictable, and efficient economic system, enabling resource management on a vast imperial scale. To support this increasingly complex administration, Darius also expanded and optimized imperial infrastructure. One of his greatest achievements was the development of the legendary communication network known as the Royal Road. Stretching more than 2,500 kilometers from Anatolia to the Persian heartland, this road became the backbone of imperial mobility, enabling travel, logistical distribution, and the transmission of messages to occur far more rapidly than before. This system was supported by the Imperial Postal Service, the Angarium, which ensured that communication was maintained across the entire empire. In the economic sphere, Darius went further by introducing a standardized currency system on a wide scale. The gold Daric and silver Siglos coins became essential instruments in facilitating interregional trade, while also strengthening the economic integration of the vast empire. Darius's ambitions did not stop at administrative and economic systems. He also continued and refined major infrastructure projects, including the restoration of an ancient canal connecting the Nile River to the Red Sea. This canal held immense strategic value, opening vital trade routes between Egypt and the eastern regions of the empire, while enhancing maritime connectivity. In the cultural and political realm, the Persian Empire under Darius was known for its relatively flexible approach to diversity. Rather than imposing uniformity, the Persian administration chose to preserve local social structures, legal systems, and religions. However, modern historians emphasize that this policy was not purely idealistic, but rather a pragmatic strategy to maintain stability across a vast multi-ethnic empire. The most tangible symbol of Darius's imperial grandeur can be seen in the construction of the monumental city of Persepolis. This city functioned as a ceremonial center of the empire, a magnificent stage that not only showcased the beauty of Persian architecture, but also represented the integration of diverse peoples under a single rule. Every relief and structure within it served as a visual narrative of imperial power and legitimacy. Yet, behind all these achievements, a shadow of conflict began to emerge on the horizon. The reign of Darius also marked the beginning of major confrontations with the Greek world. These tensions originated from the rebellion of Greek cities in Asia Minor, known as the Ionian Revolt. What initially appeared to be a regional conflict gradually evolved into an open confrontation between the Persian Empire and the Greek city-states. This tension reached a critical point in events such as the Battle of Marathon in 490 BCE. In this battle, Persian forces suffered a surprising defeat, an outcome that challenged assumptions about their military dominance. Although this defeat did not immediately destabilize Persian rule as a whole, it signaled that westward expansion faced real and formidable limits. Thus, the reign of Darius I can be understood as a historical paradox. On one hand, it represented a peak, an era in which the Persian Empire achieved extraordinary levels of administrative, economic, and infrastructural sophistication for its time. On the other hand, it also marked a turning point, the beginning of external conflicts that would eventually play a significant role in gradually weakening Persian dominance on the stage of the ancient world. After the death of Darius I, the Persian Empire did not immediately collapse. In fact, under the leadership of his son Xerxes I, the empire still demonstrated extraordinary military power, as if the world was still within its grasp. However, slowly, the course of history began to change. The great ambition to conquer the Greek world dragged Persia into a prolonged conflict that drained its energy and resources. The massive invasion of Greece in 480 BCE initially demonstrated Persian dominance. Their forces even managed to break through Greek defenses at Thermopylae, a victory that echoed throughout the ancient world, but that victory came at a high cost, and at sea, everything changed. The crushing Persian defeat at the Battle of Salamis, followed by the land defeat at Plataea a year later, became an unavoidable turning point. For the first time, Persian expansion in the west encountered a real limit. From that moment on, the empire no longer advanced as it once had, but instead began to hold its ground, preserving what it already possessed. For more than a century afterward, the Persian Empire remained standing as a great world power. From the outside, stability still appeared solid, yet behind it, cracks slowly began to emerge. Rebellions in various satrapies, internal conflicts among the ruling elite, the weakening of central control over distant regions. When Darius III ascended the throne in the 4th century BCE, he inherited an empire that was vast yet fragile. And from the west, a new threat began to approach, a young king from Macedon, Alexander the Great. The invasion began in 334 BCE. What initially appeared to be an ordinary military expedition quickly transformed into one of the greatest campaigns of conquest in ancient world history. Within a relatively short time, Alexander's forces achieved victory after Granicus River at Issus, and finally, in the decisive battle at Gaugamela in 331 BCE. At Gaugamela, The sheer size of Persian forces could not match Alexander's strategy, discipline, and military speed. This defeat was not merely a tactical loss, it marked the fall of the very center of Persian power itself. Darius III fled eastward, attempting to preserve what remained of his authority. But fate decreed otherwise. He was ultimately killed by his own nobles. And at that moment, Alexander was no longer merely a conqueror. He became the ruler of Persia. Yet one final symbol of the old glory still stood firm: Persepolis. The city of Persepolis was not merely a capital, it was a symbol of grandeur, power, and the identity of the Persian Empire built over centuries. In 330 BCE, the city fell into Alexander's hands. Not long after, an event occurred that would be etched into history. Persepolis was burned. Was this an act of revenge for Persia's destruction of Athens, or a political decision to end the symbol of the old power? Historians continue to debate this to this day. But one thing cannot be denied: the fire that consumed Persepolis also marked the end of the Achaemenid Empire. After the death of Alexander, the empire he built did not last long. His generals became involved in a major conflict known as the Wars of the Diadochi, a struggle for power that fragmented the vast territories into several parts. From this chaos, the Persian lands fell into the hands of the Seleucid Empire, a kingdom that carried Greek cultural influence deep into the heart of Asia. However, this dominance did not last forever. From the east, a new power began to rise: the Parthian Empire. Parthia revived Persian power in a different form, looser, more feudal, yet strong enough to become the main rival of the Roman Empire for centuries. Then, in 226 CE, a new Persian Empire emerged, more centralized and more organized: the Sasanian Empire. Under Sasanian rule, Persia once again transformed into one of the great powers of the world. They built a strong administrative system, a more defined Persian cultural identity, and an intense rivalry with the Byzantine Empire. For more than 400 years, these two great powers were engaged in wars that almost never truly ceased. However, prolonged conflict always carries consequences. By the early 7th century, the economy began to weaken. The military experienced exhaustion. Internal politics became fragmented. The final Great War against Byzantium, during the period 602 till 628 CE, drained nearly all of Sasanian strength. And at that very moment, a new threat emerged from the south. Arab Muslim forces, now united under Islam, began to move out of the Arabian Peninsula. Under normal circumstances, Persia might still have been able to withstand this wave, but at that time, the empire was already too weakened. A series of major defeats became inevitable. The Battle of Qadisiyah, 636, the Battle of Nahavand, 642, later known as the Decisive Victory. The last Persian ruler, Yazdegerd III, attempted to flee and preserve what remained of his power. But without sufficient support, the struggle did not last long. He was ultimately killed in 651 CE. And with his death, the Sasanian Empire came to an end, closing the long chapter of pre-Islamic Persian empires. Yet Persia did not truly vanish. Although it collapsed politically, its legacy continued to live and flow through human civilization, in the Persian language, Farsi, in the administrative systems of the Islamic world, in art, literature, and culture that continued to flourish. From the Achaemenids to the Sassanians, Persia shaped a crucial foundation for Eurasian civilization, and even after its fall, its influence continued to resonate across time, beyond the limits of the empire itself.